Marla Jensen had always believed nothing truly bad could happen in her small, quiet town until the night she saw Owen Thatch standing perfectly still in the middle of the road, his skin slick with water, his eyes locked on hers, and a trail of withered leaves stretching out behind him in the moonlight. It started on a quiet evening, the kind where the air feels heavier than usual, almost like it's pressing against your skin, weighing you down. The streets were silent except for the faint hum of distant traffic, muffled by the thick stillness. I remember walking home from work, my boots crunching over damp gravel that seemed to cling to the soles with every step. The streetlights above me began to flicker 3 short blinks, one long, and for some reason, the pattern made my stomach knot. I couldn't explain why it bothered me so much, but it felt deliberate, like someone was sending a signal I wasn't supposed to understand. The air smelled faintly of wet soil, though it hadn't rained in days. Every house I passed was dark, curtains drawn tight, as if no one lived there anymore. I felt an uneasy urge to look behind me every few seconds, convinced I'd see someone pacing my steps in the shadows. I told myself I was imagining it, but the feeling of eyes boring into my back wouldn't go away. My hand kept brushing the pepper spray in my pocket, even though I knew it wouldn't make me feel any safer. When I reached my street, it was even quieter. The flickering lights followed me down the block, casting long broken shadows that seemed to twitch unnaturally when they landed on fences and driveways. My front gate creaked when I pushed it open, the sound sharp in the stillness. That's when I noticed the first thing wrong. My doormat was soaked heavy and dark with water. I crouched down, pressing my fingertips into the fibers. They came away dripping. The smell of damp earth was stronger here, mingling with something faintly sour like decaying leaves. Then I saw a single muddy footprint pressed into the doormat, leading not away from my house, but toward it. I stood there frozen, my eyes moving slowly upward until I saw that my front door was slightly open, just enough for a thin strip of blackness to peek through. I knew I had locked it that morning. I always did. The key was still in my coat pocket, cold and metallic against my palm. My chest tightened as I stepped forward. The hinges moaned when I pushed the door wider, and the smell inside hit me instantly, thick, wet, and earthy, like the inside of a forest floor after heavy rain. The living room looked untouched. The coffee table was still cluttered with yesterday's mail. The television sat silent and dark. Nothing looked disturbed, but the silence felt wrong, too dense. I noticed it then, a faint trail of wet footprints leading away from the door, cutting through the carpet toward the hallway. I could see where the water had darkened the fibers in uneven patches. Each step was almost perfect in shape, toes, arch, and heel clearly defined. My breath grew shallow as I followed them, each pace heavier than the last. The trail stopped in front of my bedroom door. It was closed. I stared at it for a long time, my hand hovering just inches from the doorknob. A cold sensation spread through my fingertips before I even touched the metal, as if the air on the other side was somehow different, colder, heavier. My pulse thundered in my ears as I slowly turned the knob. The latch clicked softly, and the door eased open. The smell inside was overwhelming, damp and almost sweet in a sick way, like rotting vegetation. My room was empty at first glance. The lamp on the nightstand was still where it belonged, the books stacked neatly beside it, but the bed was wrong. The blanket sagged heavily, soaked through, with dark water dripping slowly onto the floor. The sound of it hitting the hardwood was painfully loud in the quiet. I stepped closer, the floorboards creaking under my weight. When I reached the bed, I saw something small resting on the pillow. It wasn't wet like the rest of the bedding. It was dry and brittle, a single withered brown leaf. Its veins were stark and black, and its edges curled inward like it had been plucked from a tree months ago. I picked it up without thinking, feeling how fragile it was, how easily it could crumble in my fingers. That's when I realized the water soaking the bed wasn't just water, it was muddy. Small clumps of soil clung to the fabric, and beneath it, the mattress felt uneven, like something lumpy and solid was hidden underneath. My breath caught as I leaned closer, pressing my ear to the damp surface. For a moment, I thought I heard a faint, rhythmic sound from deep inside the mattress. Not a creak, not the shifting of springs, but something that sounded disturbingly like breathing. I dropped the leaf. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in the corner of my living room with every light on, watching the bedroom door like it might suddenly swing open on its own. The image of the soaked mattress and that strange leaf kept looping in my mind. I kept telling myself to call someone, a neighbor, the police, anyone, but the thought of trying to explain it out loud made me hesitate. What would I even say? That my bed was full of mud and I thought it was breathing. No one would believe me. When morning finally came, the first rays of sunlight slipping through the blinds, I forced myself to check the bedroom again. My heart was hammering as I stepped inside. Everything was dry. The mattress was firm and clean. The pillow was bare. The leaf was gone. No dampness, no clumps of soil, nothing at all. It was as if it had never happened. I convinced myself it had been some kind of waking dream, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. I'd been working too many late nights, barely eating, barely resting. That had to be it. But the thought didn't comfort me. If it wasn't real, that meant my mind was slipping. If it was real, I didn't want to think about what that meant. The day passed in a haze. I went through the motions of work, barely paying attention. But by the time I stepped off the bus that evening, the air felt different again, thick and damp, with that faint earthy smell lingering in every breath I took. I told myself I was imagining it, but when I turned onto my street, the streetlights began flickering again. 3 short blinks, 1 long. I froze, staring up at them. The pattern was identical to the night before, like the lights themselves were repeating something I didn't understand. My steps slowed as I approached my house. I scanned the front yard, the porch, the windows. Nothing seemed out of place. The doormat was dry. The door was firmly shut. I hesitated for a long moment before unlocking it, bracing myself for that smell again. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it that morning. The air was still, the silence unbroken, but my skin prickled like I was being watched from somewhere deep inside the house. I locked the door behind me and headed toward the kitchen, trying to shake off the unease. That's when I heard a faint, irregular dripping sound. It was coming from the bathroom. I told myself it was probably just the tap, but my footsteps slowed as I got closer. The sound grew sharper, more deliberate, like each drop was falling into something shallow. I flicked the bathroom light on, and the sight that greeted me froze me in place. The sink was full. Water had pooled nearly to the brim, but it wasn't clear. It was murky, tinted brown, as if it had been scooped from a stagnant pond. Floating in the center was a single withered leaf, identical to the one I'd found on my pillow. Its curled edges swayed with each faint ripple. My first instinct was to pull the plug, to drain it away, but before I could move, the water shivered. A slow ripple spread outward, though nothing had touched it. I leaned forward slightly, peering into the cloudy depths, trying to see the bottom. When I realized the sink wasn't just filled with dirty water, it was deeper than it should have been, much deeper. I couldn't see where it ended. A sudden movement below the surface made me jerk back. Something pale had shifted in the darkness, just for an instant. My pulse thundered in my ears. Then the overhead light flickered once, twice, before going completely out, plunging me into pitch blackness. The dripping sound didn't stop. But now, it wasn't coming from the sink. It was right behind me, slow, heavy drops hitting the tile. The smell of damp soil filled the air so strongly I could taste it. My hands were trembling as I turned, but I couldn't see anything in the darkness, only the faint sound of water hitting the floor, closer now, almost at my feet. I stumbled backward into the hallway, my shoulder slamming against the wall. My breath came in sharp, shallow gasps. The light in the kitchen flickered weakly ahead of me, and I ran toward it without looking back. My socks squelched with each step, and only when I reached the far side of the house did I realize they were soaked through. The bathroom was silent now. I don't remember making the decision to leave the house that night, only that I suddenly found myself outside under the pale, uneven glow of the streetlights. My chest was tight, my breathing ragged, as if I'd been running for a long time. I stood across the street from my home, staring at the dark windows, waiting for something to move behind them. The longer I looked, the more the stillness unnerved me. Nothing stirred, no flicker of light, no shifting curtain. The house looked dead, but I could feel it watching me. I stayed out there for hours, my feet rooted to the spot. The cold sank into my bones, yet I didn't dare leave. My thoughts grew sluggish, looping endlessly around the same question. If I went back inside, what would I find? When my legs finally gave in to exhaustion, I stepped onto the sidewalk and walked toward the front door like I was approaching a sleeping animal, terrified of waking it. The key turned icily in the lock. The air that greeted me was stale, heavy, and faintly dusty. It smelled wrong, not just earthy now, but old, like the scent you'd expect in a house abandoned for decades. I closed the door behind me, and the sound seemed muffled, as though the walls had swallowed it. Something felt off the moment I stepped into the kitchen. I glanced at the counter where I'd left a coffee mug that morning. A thin layer of dust coated the rim. My eyes drifted to the wall clock, but the second hand wasn't moving. I pulled my phone from my pocket to check the time, but my heart lurched when I saw the date. 3 days had passed. I stared at the glowing screen, my mind trying to process it. I had been gone for hours at most, and yet the world had moved on without me. I checked the fridge, hoping for some grounding proof of reality. The moment I opened the door, a foul wave of rancid air rolled out. Every carton, every jar, every leftover container was covered in a thin gray fuzz of mold. Liquids had separated into strange layers, some dark and thick, others pale and congealed. My stomach turned as I slammed it shut. A strange weakness crept over me, a hollow, aching hunger that made my legs feel unsteady. I reached for a box of cereal in the pantry, but when I tore it open, the flakes inside crumbled into dust between my fingers. It felt like the house itself had aged everything inside while I was away, including me. I stumbled toward my bedroom, each step heavier than the last. My body ached, my head throbbed. I pushed the door open and collapsed onto the bed without even looking around. The moment my body hit the mattress, the exhaustion became unbearable, dragging me into a deep, dreamless void. When I opened my eyes again, it was night. I blinked, disoriented, staring up at the faint glow of the ceiling light. My body felt stiff, as though I had been lying there for much longer than a single night. Then I noticed dark, wet shapes on the floor. A trail of footprints led from the bedroom door toward the bed. They glistened faintly in the low light, the edges smudged as if they'd been left by someone moving slowly, heavily. My eyes followed the trail to where it ended at the side of my bed. My heart stuttered when I saw the shape of the prints clearly. They weren't large. In fact, they were the same size as my own. I sat up slowly, pulling my feet onto the mattress without thinking. My mind raced, trying to find an explanation. Maybe I had gotten up in the night without remembering. Sleepwalking it had to be. But as I glanced toward the end of the bed, the pit in my stomach deepened. The footprints didn't just lead to the bed, they led away from it too. They traced a slow, meandering path back to the door, but then turned toward the hallway. Something about the way they curved, the uneven spacing, made my skin crawl. They looked like mine, but I knew with absolute certainty they weren't made by me. Somewhere in the distance, deep inside the house, a faint dripping sound began again. The house felt different now, as though the walls had shifted while I slept. The familiar layout seemed stretched, the hallway a little longer, the ceilings a little higher. Every shadow stretched and heavy. I wanted to leave, but when I reached the front door, the handle wouldn't turn. I twisted it harder, yanking until my shoulder ached, but the lock held firm. It wasn't stuck, it simply refused to open. My breath came fast as I moved from window to window, but each one resisted me. The glass was cold beneath my hands, harder than it should be, almost like stone. Even when I struck it with a heavy bookend, the sound barely echoed, the glass not so much as scratched. The air in the house was thick, carrying that smell of wet soil again, stronger than before. It felt like it had seeped into the walls, into the carpet, into my skin. I tried to distract myself by moving from room to room, but each one felt emptier than the last, as though something vital had been stripped away. The photos on the shelves seemed faded, the colors muted, the faces harder to recognize. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked unfamiliar, my eyes duller, my skin paler, like the house was slowly leaching the life out of me. Hunger twisted my stomach, but the kitchen offered nothing. The food had rotted even further, some of it liquefying into black sludge. The smell was unbearable, forcing me to slam the fridge shut. My phone lay dead on the counter, unresponsive no matter how long I held the button. Every clock in the house ticked at a different rhythm, some too fast, others painfully slow, each one a fractured heartbeat that set my nerves on edge. That's when I heard it, a low, dragging sound coming from the hallway. Slow, deliberate, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. My first thought was that something had fallen, but the sound was too steady, too purposeful. It moved closer in small intervals, followed by silence, then another dragging pull. I froze in the kitchen doorway, staring down the dim hallway toward the dark corner where the sound was coming from. My chest rose and fell too quickly, my ears straining to catch every note of that awful noise. The smell of damp earth grew stronger with every passing second. Something emerged from the shadows. At first it was only a shape, indistinct and wet, glistening faintly in the half-light. It didn't walk, it slid as though its limbs weren't quite right for standing. Water dripped from it in slow, heavy drops, pooling on the floor beneath. My mouth went dry as it moved closer, revealing skin that was pale and sagging. It surfaced uneven like soft clay pressed too many times. Then I saw them withered, brown leaves clinging to its form, embedded in its flesh like growths. Some trembled faintly, curling and uncurling as though they were breathing. The thing's head tilted in an unnatural twitching motion, as if studying me. I couldn't see its eyes, but I felt the weight of its gaze all the same. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't respond. The sound of my heartbeat thundered in my ears, drowning out everything except the steady drip of water from the creature's body. It stopped just short of the kitchen threshold, and for a moment, the air seemed to still completely. Then, in the blink of an eye, it was gone. The hallway was empty, silent, as if it had never been there at all. I stood rooted to the spot, staring at the place where it had been. Slowly, my gaze fell to the floor. A dark, wet patch remained where it had stopped, the water soaking into the wood in irregular shapes. In the center of that puddle was something small and pale. I crouched down, my hands trembling as I reached for it. It was a fingernail. I don't know how long I've been trapped inside this place now. The days and nights have bled together into something shapeless, time slipping past like water through my fingers. I can't tell if hours have passed or weeks. The hunger that gnawed at me at first has dulled into a heavy emptiness, as if my body has stopped expecting food at all. My thoughts feel slower, harder to hold on to. Sometimes I find myself standing in a room with no idea how I got there. The house feels alive in ways I can't ignore anymore. The walls seem to flex and settle when I'm not looking, the corners stretching into angles that don't make sense. The sound of movement inside the walls has become constant now, a faint scratching. The slow crawl of something dragging itself along the unseen spaces between plaster and wood. At night I hear soft murmurs beneath the noise, and sometimes I recognize the voice. It's my own whispering words I can't quite make out, the tone urgent and pleading, though I don't know who it's speaking to. The streetlights outside still blink in that strange rhythm, but I no longer try to decipher it. I'm not sure they're meant for me anymore. Sometimes, I catch a flicker of movement in the glass, not outside, but reflected shapes crossing behind me in the house when I'm alone. The mirrors have started to betray me too. My reflection doesn't always move when I do. Sometimes it lags, other times it tilts its head when I'm still. The eyes in the glass seem darker now, the skin paler and looser, the mouth fixed in an expression I can't place. Last night I woke to find the bed soaked again. The water was ice cold, seeping into my clothes, pooling around me. I sat up slowly, bracing myself for the sight of another withered leaf on the pillow, but there was no leaf this time. Instead, a small, pale object rested there, perfectly scented. I picked it up and turned it over in my hand. It was a tooth, my tooth. I could feel the smooth gap along my gum when I pressed my tongue there, but there had been no pain, no blood. I wanted to throw it away, but I couldn't make myself move. I just sat there, staring at it, until my vision blurred. At some point I must have fallen asleep again, though I don't remember lying down. When I opened my eyes, the tooth was gone. In its place was a small mound of damp soil. Today, the movement in the walls has grown louder. It's no longer a faint shuffle, it's a deliberate crawling, as though whatever is inside is getting closer to the surface. The smell of damp earth is so strong now that it clings to my clothes and hair. My hands are stained with it no matter how many times I try to wash them. My fingernails are caked dark at the edges, and I don't remember touching the soil at all. A few hours ago, or maybe minutes, the air in the bedroom shifted. The temperature dropped sharply, and the silence deepened in a way that made the tiny hairs on my arms rise. I could feel something in the corner of the room. I didn't want to look, but my eyes moved on their own, drawn to that shadowed space. It was there, the pale, sagging shape, the glistening skin, the withered leaves that pulsed faintly as though feeding on something unseen. But this time, it wasn't dripping water. It was smiling. The expression was wrong too wide, too certain, like it knew something I didn't. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. Then I saw the details more clearly. The shape of its face, the slope of its shoulders, the way the hands hung at its sides. It wasn't just watching me, it was me. Every feature matched perfectly, but not as I am now. This was me as I should have been before I stepped into this house. Healthy, whole, alive. It took a single step toward me, and the sound it made wasn't a drag or a crawl this time. It was the sound of my own footsteps. I don't remember what happened next. I think it reached me. I think it's still here. But when I look in the mirror now, the reflection is smiling. And I'm not.